All right, we're back with more of Talk of the Neighborhoods. I'm Joe Heisler, host. Tonight, we're all politics all the time, and what better, this is shaping up to be a terrific election year, and our election 2009 coverage tonight as we're looking at the at-large city council race. As I mentioned earlier, the decisions by councilors Michael Flaherty and Sam Yoon to throw their hats in the mayor's race has opened the doors to a large number of candidates eyeing one of the 4 at-large council seats. Earlier, Ego Azidi's here, and now joining me, a young man with some deep political roots, transplanted to East Boston, where he is a homeowner. When we last saw him, he was a top aide to Councilor Flaherty, and since then, many things have happened to him. And now the best part, he's running for public office. Andrew Kenneally is here. And Andrew, thanks so much for coming.
Joe, how are you?
Nice to have you here.
So great to see you.
Well, nice to see you. So tell us, because you have been around politics. So we were talking before the show. Of course, your mother ran for office. You worked for Councilor Flaherty. I know you worked in Washington.
Yep.
You worked for Joe Moakley.
Joe Moakley, one of the best.
Yeah.
You know, you can't get any better than Joe.
So we've kind of come full circle here. How was it you decided to run for an at-large council seat? And you announced early.
Well, actually, I've got into the race.
Talked about it.
You're right. I've talked about it. I've been obviously meeting with people all across Boston, from community leaders to labor leaders to political leaders, as well as just basic residents of Boston. You know, finding out what's important on their minds, what kind of things they're struggling with. I've been in government for over a decade now. Started back in Washington, D.C., working for, as you said, Joe Moakley. Spent about 4 years down there working on Capitol Hill, learning the ins and outs of the federal government. Then traveled to Northern Ireland, where I studied ethnic conflict. I also worked as a peace monitor in the worst sections of Belfast. And then I came back to Boston, mostly to pay off my school debt. But worked for, came back to work for Maura Hennigan as her chief of staff, and then later joined the council president, Michael Flaherty. And so that's over about 10 years. And what led me to this decision, Joe, is I think we talked about earlier, it's a personal issue. I mean, several months ago, back in September, doctors told me I had a brain tumor. I don't know how many people have had that kind of news said to them, but for me it was pretty alarming, pretty shocking, and you wonder, 33 years old, 2 master's degrees, 10 years in government, you think things are never going to be the same. And, thankfully, weeks later, doctors were able to remove the tumor. And not only did they give me a clean bill of health, they also gave me a new lease on life. And I said to myself, if I was going to get through this, I was going to go back to what I loved. Because I ventured into the private sector, and that was helping people. And, like I said, I have 10 years of experience and, so many great memories, so many great accomplishments, a real record of passing legislation, of getting pilot programs going to help out children, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, that must have been a terrible shock to you. Kind of changed the way you looked at the world? As you said, it turned out to be benign, but anything involving your brain is never without risk. But,
right. Well, it's one of those things. I talk to people all the time, and health issues are such a thing that connects a lot of people. It has these deep bonds. For me, when I was told, I just started to have that moment of reflection about what was important to me in my life. Life can be taken from you so easily. I was sitting down with somebody today who lost a gentleman who's a big supporter of mine, who lost his wife about 3 years ago in an instant. I think, as he said, they were in the Grand Canyon in August, and by September he had lost her. So it's understanding the preciousness of life, and figuring out what makes you happiest, and what makes you most passionate. And for me, it's helping people, and I'm uniquely qualified for the at-large city council race. I've done every aspect of the job.
That being said, you also know what a steep climb it can be. It's a citywide. I mean, just getting on the ballot is daunting now. It's back up to the old standard, which was 1,500 signatures. And there's a pretty short window, pretty short porch within which to gather those
Right.
signatures, seeming to indicate unless you've got a citywide organization, even getting on the ballot won't be interesting. Won't be easy, I should say.
Well, I'm lucky in that, you know, I've had experience, you know, working in politics, and especially over the last 4 years working for at-large councilors, Forrest Moore, Hennigan, and Michael Flaherty. So I've been able to travel all across the city, even though I grew up in West Roxbury and now live in East Boston. You know I have friends and supporters in every neighborhood of the city. And so you're exactly right. I mean, I think it was 500 signatures, you know, not too recently, and now it's jumped up to 1,500. And so you need to have an organization in place because you don't have a lot of time. But I feel pretty confident about, you know, my chances. So.
Again, Andrew Kenneally making a run for one of the at-large city council seats, and here tonight on Talk to the Neighborhoods. If you have a question or comment for Andrew, give us a call. The number's right there on the screen, or it should be shortly if it isn't. He is, of course, a longtime political operative, activist, and now living in East Boston, and making your first bid for public office?
First bid, yeah.
What have you discovered about that? Because you talk about you know, reawakening or awakening, as the case may be, from your experience there with your health. A little different being on the other side
totally.
of the coin, from the person behind the scenes. Pulling, well, I don't really actually pull the strings,
no.
but
you're just an aide to. Yeah, I've been lucky. I've had great teachers. You know, from, like I said, from Oakley to Flaherty, and I mean, many times I'd be sitting in this room, kind of watching you and you know, one of the persons I was an aide to. So it's definitely different.
You're thinking to yourself, what is he talking about?
Exactly. Well, I usually know because we've discussed it, but. And obviously, as being a policy director or being a chief of staff, I mean, you're really deep in the minutia of every issue that's going on throughout the city. So it's a transition. I think the biggest you know, issue is obviously the campaign part of it, having to raise money in order to get your message out. Very difficult thing.
How are you doing with that?
I feel like I'm competitive. I'm doing pretty well. I mean.
It's something we in the media always like to look at to see who's serious, although it's not always a true indicator, but you know, it does indicate a seriousness of purpose, so to speak.
I don't think, we don't go into numbers on TV, but I mean, it's a costly race.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they talk about past races costing in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is ungodly, you know, for a city council race, but that's what it takes for a citywide race to get your message out to the people. But you know, there's many different ways. I mean, we're lucky today that we have things like Facebook and social networking, and there's also the shoe leather that, you know, Boston residents deserve, that you get out there. Exactly. So it's a mixture of those two, which, you know, I'm definitely going to utilize and hopefully be successful.